Yes, good morning and welcome. I know we all feel we've swum here this morning, but again, I think I say this every year. For some reason, we picked the wettest day of the year to hold this, and I'm always very grateful that we all get out of bed, and some of us, perhaps like myself, a little bit reluctantly thinking, why do I have this every year, in the middle of winter? But when we get here, I always find it a really inspiring event, so thank you very much. Someone once said that the difference between a compassionate and non-compassionate person is simply imagination. The imagination to walk in someone else's shoes. The imagination to see things through another person's eyes. For 15 years, Australia for UNHCR has been asking Australians to imagine what it is like to be a refugee, to be forced from your home and run for your life, to be separated from everything and everyone you hold dear, to not know what tomorrow or indeed any other day after that will hold in store for you. When we first opened our doors 15 years ago, we ourselves never imagined that so many Australians would respond so compassionately to our calls to help people thousands of miles away who we would never know and possibly never have any kind of contact with. I remember the very first cheque we received in the mail for our first appeal. It was for $25 to help Afghan families returning to their homes after years of war. And coincidentally, it was also the first appeal our long-standing Special Representative Ian Chappell put his name to garner support for our cause. At the time, I have to say it almost seemed like a miracle that someone had actually read our letter, helped along with Ian's name on it at that time, but also responded without asking for anything except that their gift would help another human being. Australia for UNHCR now has over 70,000 donors just doing that. But it's not just imagination that drives our work. For 15 years, we've focused on providing practical life-saving support, and in the earlier video you saw many, many examples of that. Very basic things: plastic sheet for shelter, kitchen pots to cook dry rations, blankets to keep a child warm. When you see people arriving across a border with only what they can carry, you see how vital this support is. But we've also sought to do things that wouldn't happen without Australian donor support, and we're very proud of the number of firsts that Australian donors have funded. The first ever health program for Rohingya refugees, who must be one of the most marginalised groups under UNHCR's protection in Burma. The first ever reproductive health program in Somalia. The first ever secondary school in Nakivale refugee camp, and the first ever computer centre for refugees in Uganda. Over the last 15 years, we've supported UNHCR's humanitarian operations in every major emergency, from East Timor, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, the Horn of Africa famine, Syria, South Sudan, which our guest speaker Aware knows so well, and now also Nigeria. I think in a very kind of humbling figure, when we started, we spoke about 14 million refugees. That was in the year 2000. That quickly went to 20 million. UNHCR released its global statistics yesterday, and it's increased from the 50 million that we saw on the video. It's now 60 million displaced people worldwide. So, a huge, humanitarian phenomena of our century. Like so many current emergencies, the situation in Nigeria has had sporadic media coverage, apart from the outrageous kidnapping of 200 schoolgirls last year by the rebel group Boko Haram. However, that incident, as we know, was only the tip of the iceberg. There's a staggering 1.5 million people now displaced within Nigeria itself, and many others have fled to neighbouring countries. Many of those targeted by the violence, as will be highlighted in a short video we're going to see in a minute, are young children. Today, as Sandra has highlighted, we're asking for your support to provide emergency survival kits made up of bed mats, blankets, cooking pots, soap, mosquito nets, solar lanterns. We also need support in funding vaccinations against polio, cholera and measles. And with so many people without shelter, we're asking for donations to provide all-weather tents, which might be useful here too, I think. We should test them out the front maybe later. As we've heard, UNHCR is dealing with an unprecedented era of global displacement. Ultimately, it's political solutions that must be found. But in the meantime, I guess it's up to all of us to help provide humanitarian relief and to continue imagining a world where everyone has a safe and secure place to call home. So thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate your support, and I have to say, when I go and visit refugee camps, as part of what I talk about imagination, we have to imagine people over there and how we might help. On one of my last visits with my deputy, Deborah O'Neill, we read out messages of support from donors to refugees that we met. And at first we wondered how it would go, you know, and we were sitting down there in a small encampment with refugees around us, reading these messages. And I have to say, people, you know, I thought they would just think, who are these strange, you know, aliens almost landing here? But at the end of, we'd read up about 10, you know, one of the families stood up and said, I want to say how much that makes me feel part of the world. I want you to tell your Australian donors that it means a lot that other people are thinking of us. And I think that's the imagination on the other side, that people know that there's a whole room of people, and people around the world do know about this breakfast now, you know, 360 people coming together to put their hands up for refugees and send that message of support. So thank you very much.